Hi, 8th grade. I want to quickly remind you before we get started that you have some homework due today, and that is your Lesson 10 reading notes. So please make sure that that's shared with me. And also remember that we have a test next Friday. All right, here we go. We are doing a performance assessment today. So a lot of class today will be working on that. It says you are a Parks and Wildlife official working at a marine park in Hawaii. Your job is to use your understanding of asexual and sexual reproduction, genetic inheritance, and how genes in the environment influence traits to design effective management plans for the park. Okay, I'm going to go over a few slides. And if you are confused or you want to review, you can also watch a video that's on your in your TCI Interactive Student Notebook pages that will help you out too. All right, let's get started. So, see a picture of corals to the right? The problem that you're facing in this performance assessment is that they are dying. And that's, of course, important. As you can see up on the screen, it's because they provide food and habitat. They prevent erosion by protecting the beach from strong waves. So your job is to use your knowledge of genetics to figure out how to save the corals. Let's do a little bit of background information on corals here. Okay, corals are invertebrates that live in huge colonies of many individuals. Each individual looks like a cup and is called a polyp. Corals live in a close relationship with certain algae. The algae live inside the corals and capture energy from the sun. They help the coral polyps by providing energy. Now, you may have remembered us talking about this a while ago, but corals sometimes will die through this process called bleaching. You can see that happening in the picture to your right. This happens when the temperature gets so high that the corals get stressed out, and it's basically like they spit out the algae that's inside of them. And once the algae is gone, it leaves this white color behind, and that's will kill the coral because now they don't have energy coming from the algae to help them live. When corals experience stress, they spit out their algae. This is called bleaching. The loss of the algae makes the coral look white. Corals need the algae because they get energy from the sun and share it with the coral. With no change in the stressful conditions, bleaching will eventually lead to coral death. Not good. So that's your job to figure out how to figure this out. Okay. But some corals, even of the same species, have different alleles that allow them to tolerate more heat. These corals are more likely to survive when temperatures rise. Water temperature is often higher, closer to the shoreline. Now, taking a look at these, you have one on the left that's a near-shore reef. To the right, you have one that's an offshore reef. Here's your beach. There's your land. Here's your ocean. Now, which of these do you think is more likely to have a heat-tolerant allele? Anyone? You got it. It is the near-shore reef. And that's because the ones near shore would need to have that heat-tolerant allele in order to survive because the water is hotter near the beach, near the shore. This map describes 2 reefs over the last several decades. How healthy do you think each reef has been on average over this time? Okay, so the nearshore reef, this is what it's been experiencing. It's had a high temperature. Its genes have alleles that allow it to tolerate high temperatures. So do you think that this nearshore reef has been healthy at high temperatures? I think I heard a yes. Okay. The offshore reef, the temperature is low. And the genes that the offshore reef has does not allow it to tolerate high temperatures. So do you think that this reef has been healthy at low temperatures? Another yes. You got it. Okay, here we go. Now temperatures are rising. Okay, so the nearshore reef, the temperature is now getting higher. Again, its genes do allow it to tolerate high temperatures. Do you think that this reef is still healthy with the rising temperatures? Okay, offshore reef. The temperature is also rising to high, but its genes do not allow it to tolerate tolerate that high temperature. Is it healthy with rising temperatures? No. Good job. Okay, here we go. What could park officials do to improve the chances of offshore coral reef survival? Talk about that with someone near you, or raise your hand and share what you think about that. Okay, maybe you thought of this, but this could be something you could do if you're a park official. Make sure that the corals that have the high temperature tolerance alleles make it to the offshore area. I want you to start thinking about how you could make that happen. To figure out how to introduce the heat-tolerant alleles to the offshore reef corals, you need to know how corals reproduce. Like we've talked about with other organisms this year, they can use either asexual or sexual reproduction, depending on their environment and the situation that they're in. So, asexually, they can reproduce when their polyps divide, as you can see here. But they can also reproduce sexually when sex cells travel through the water and then fuse in a new location. So first question, how could you use asexual reproduction as a tool in healing offshore reefs? How could you use sexual reproduction? How could you plan which corals to breed if heat tolerance is controlled by one gene with two alleles? Okay, I'm going to let the teacher pause this video so that you guys can discuss that together. Okay, so here are some possible answers that you may have gotten. If you want to use asexual reproduction, you could transport near-shore corals to offshore reefs where they reproduce and pass heat tolerance alleles to the offspring. Okay. You may have come up with this idea. You could allow the near-shore corals to breed with offshore corals in the offshore location so that the offspring can inherit heat tolerance alleles. So transferring near-shore corals over to the offshore ones so that they can spread the sex cells that are necessary for reproduction. Okay, and last one, Punnett squares, our favorite. Okay, let's keep moving forward here. Step 2. Let's assume that heat tolerance is controlled by one gene and has two alleles. The alleles are capital T, which is tolerant and dominant, and lowercase t, which is not tolerant and recessive. By the way, if I haven't said it already, you can be following along on your interactive student notebook pages. Make sure you're in the performance assessment after lesson 10. So here comes the ISN. You can fill in the Punnett square there. And then figure out the proportion of offspring that will have near-shore corals, that will have heat tolerance. Okay. I'll let you guys continue with that. You can work on that with your partner to go through that in your interactive student notebook pages. And you may pause here if you would like to do that quickly. Okay, step 3. Now we are analyzing inheritance with sexual reproduction. So it says, now fill in the series of Punnett squares in your notebook to calculate what proportion of offspring will have dominant, tolerant alleles in the following cases of sexual reproduction. Near-shore corals with alleles heterozygous, T, reproduce sexually with offshore corals with alleles homozygous recessive, T. I'll show you the answers to this. You should get 50%, 100%, and 100%. Again, you can pause that and discuss or ask any questions at any time. Okay, So now here comes the part where you have to make a plan and a report. It says, why aren't the sex cells from the two reefs mixing naturally? Sex cells in the ocean often reach each other by moving through currents. But a local problem is stopping this from happening. Streams are carrying sediments, tiny bits of dirt, from cleared farmland into the ocean. The dirt keeps the sex cells from moving through the water very far. As a result, the two reefs cannot sexually reproduce naturally. Your group needs to make a plan to get near-shore dominant T alleles into the offshore reef. Remember, alleles are present in the cells of corals at all life stages. So be creative with your solution. Step 4. Use evidence from your Punnett squares and the entire unit to make an argument for the best way to preserve the offshore reefs. There's no one answer. Many strategies could work. So write up your scientific explanation in a report and be sure to support an effective plan to introduce dominant T alleles to the offshore reef using evidence. Predict how introducing dominant T alleles to the offshore reef will lead to trait variation in future generations of offspring. And explain how both genes and the environment influence whether coral offspring will thrive. At the end, you can look at this rubric that you see on your ISN pages and double check yourself. You are aiming for this proficient column. So read through those and make sure that you are hitting those proficient requirements in order to get a good grade on this. By the way, I know you're wondering, this will be one of your first grades for the 4th quarter and it is a project grade. Okay. When you are done with this, at the end of class, if you have some time, you can discuss these questions to wrap it up. Could also be used as an exit ticket if the teacher so desires. But otherwise, that's all that I have. Again, if you have questions on anything, look through your ISN questions. You can rewatch or you can watch the video that's posted there if you have headphones. But yeah, good luck and have fun. See you later.